Well, good afternoon. It's Bill Maharis coming to you from, well, usually I have on my press box overtime hat, but I got a special guest today. And in honor of this young man that I'm getting ready to introduce you to, as you all know, people that know me personally, I have a little connection with Satellite High School. My daughter's a graduate from there, did a little coaching, girls lacrosse, a little announcing. So I do have something from those days. I also got my Gator shirt on. You all know I went to University of Florida. So the young man that in honor of him today, I'm wearing my Satellite hat and my Gator shirt. But, you know, we have so many great athletes here in Brevard County. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool that we've had great athletes in this county for many, many years, even before my time. And I reached out to this young man and asked if it would be okay if we interviewed, and he graciously gave up some of his time this morning as we take this to do so. One of the all-time greats at Satellite High School, one of the all-time greats, not just by my account, but from a lot of others that I'll introduce you to, at the University of Florida, as one of the best defensive linemen, nose guards that they've ever had. We actually were up there at the same time. So I was probably in the row right below the lights while he was down there playing. And we'll talk about that a little bit since we all were up there at the same time. But without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Robin Fisher.
Appreciate you having me on.
Well, thanks.
I'm really happy that you still call me a young man. So,
well, hey, listen, you know what I told somebody the other day, you know, I'm not going to lie, I'm 65, you know, 50, 60, none of that, but I'm on the same Medicare plan as my mom now. So that kind of hits home a little bit, but I appreciate you joining. Go ahead.
I can say I'll join you in December.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hey, it's a great insurance plan. I have to say that. All right. So let's talk a little bit. I know you grew up, I believe, in Indian Harbor Beach, played at Satellite High School. Are you originally from here, or what got you to Brevard County?
My father was stationed, got stationed at Patrick Air Force Base in 1971. So once he got stationed there, and he was actually in the Navy, which was unusual for a Navy guy getting stationed at Patrick, right? But at the time, the Armed Forces was doing they call it Defense Race Relations Institute, which would basically, he was one of the instructors and one of the ones that started that Defense Race Relations Institute. And so he was a Navy guy that got stationed at Patrick. And so we moved here in 71 and, you know, been pretty much in Brevard that whole time, other than, you know, a couple UF and a little bit of, you know, USFL football.
Right. Awesome. Very good. Well, my son's a proud member of the Air Force, so I'm hoping maybe one day he'll come from Idaho to Patrick Air Force Base. So I am interested. I did work at Delora. I also worked at Hoover. I imagine you went to, which one of those middle schools did you go to?
7th grade, Hoover, 8th and 9th grade, Delora.
Okay.
So both of them, and then moved back to Indian Harbor my junior year.
Okay. And I'm assuming back then, because it flip-flopped during our whole time that we were in school, there was there 9th grade, I think you said, at Delora?
Yes, sir. 9th grade at Delora.
And they had football back then. A lot of people don't realize.
Sure did. So, yeah, so I played on the 8th and 9th grade at Delora. And, of course, before that, the Indian Harbor Beach Braves and the Indian Harbor Beach Chiefs, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a Pop Warner Midget League at that point.
Yeah, and I remember back then I played a short period of time for the Chiefs over in Rockledge. You know, unlike my son, he was built for power. I was built for speed. I think I was 140 when I graduated. So, yeah, tackle football was not but we did have a lot of those options back then. And that is one thing that I miss now that we've taken out 9th grade. We don't have all those sports. Any other sports or activities that you were involved in during your middle school time?
Not in the middle school. Of course, I did the shot put at Satellite. So I did some track my senior year. Was a shot put thrower. So.
So I have to ask you, my son, same thing. He, you know, it's funny when he played football for the first time at Rockledge, and then coach said, well, now you're going to wrestle. So then he wrestled. Well, now you're going to do track. He did the shot put too. Did they have the big man relay back then?
No.
Okay.
But it's funny because I wasn't a big man, even though I threw the shot, but I think I don't know, my senior year, I was 203. So, my junior year, probably about buck 90. So
Wow.
I was
Wow.
actually running with they put me on a couple relays a couple times at Satellite, and I was running with the sprinters. So,
Wow. No
um,
kidding.
yeah, I had a little bit of speed, but my defensive line coach named Gary Jones at the time, he was a big shot putter, and so he and I was fairly strong, so he put me on the shot put, and so we had a little bit of success there.
Well, that seemed like my son. He was an offensive lineman. I think his senior year, he might have weighed 205.
Okay, all right,
He was
yeah,
about 190.
yeah.
So let me ask you this. I was going to ask you this later, but you brought it up, and I think one thing that helped him and the other offensive linemen, because they all wrestled, they were all smaller, but
Right.
they knew how to maneuver. So and of course they called you the little big man.
Mhm.
What enabled you? And I think I saw that you bench pressed 505 pounds. So let's not lose any sight of how strong you were.
Uh,
But being maybe smaller than most that play that position, what enabled you to be as successful as you were at all those levels?
yeah, I was blessed with having some speed, and so I ran a 4.56 one time in the 40, which is my fastest time, and not very many linemen run that. And so a combination of speed and I lived in a weight room back then, so at 505-pound bench presser. So
Wow.
between that, I was able to have some strength and some speed. And it used to be funny. I remember scouting reports when coach would line up, who's across from who. And
Right.
that's typically they'll lay the line out, go, Ferry Fisher, you got so and so. He's 6'5", 220, 310, 380. And I used to like those guys who are like 275 to 300. When they told me I had a small center at 240, I said, well, he's probably quick too, So I prefer to have the big guy versus the little small guy that's my size and had speed too.
Does it, one thing I read that I think was pretty funny when I was reading an article by, I think it was Scott Carter, and how much you bench press. And I think you commented at that time, the quarterback, Wayne Peace, actually weighed 5 pounds more than you did.
Yeah.
So I thought,
We got on a scale one day, and I looked, I got on it, and I don't know. I was probably back then. I was probably 230 or maybe 235 my senior year, and Wayne jumped on, and he was heavier than me. And we sit there and go, Wayne, I can't believe this. You're a fat quarterback.
yeah, right. Yeah, it wasn't you
By the
being.
way, by the way, he's a State Farm agent in Lakeland.
Oh, is that the funniest thing?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
gosh, that's so cool. And like I say, we'll talk about that because I was up there at the same time.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Satellite High School. How I couldn't find much information. How was your team back in those days when you played?
We Fred Chase, who's has passed away and gone to heaven now, but Fred Chase was the head coach, and so was Gary Jones, the defensive coordinator, and they actually changed Satellite football. And our senior year we were 8-2, and we lost to Astronaut and Merritt Allen, which both of them had great programs back in the late 70s.
Right.
So, but Chase had changed the culture of Satellite High. He took a bunch of guys that were used to surfing and said he would make a football team out of them.
Okay.
And he bought an experienced Cocoa. He was at Cocoa Beach, a head coach one time, Gary Jones, and he bought him as defensive coordinator.
Wow.
And we had a pretty good run there, especially in the senior year. And it was fun. It was good times. As you know, that's a great community to grow up in, and it's a great. It was a great high school football team that year too. So
it was. Yeah, and that's great to hear. A good friend of ours, Ted Kimmy, did the same thing a few years ago at Satellite. Now he's taken over the head reins at Cocoa Beach, and we're excited for him to do the same thing up there. So I know it was a lot different back in the day. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have email. I don't think you had a TikTok or Twitter account.
No.
So how did the recruiting work? Was it just letters? Was it calling? Was it your parents and coaches combined? How did that process work then?
Yeah. So back then, it was funny. It was all U.S. mail, right? You're right. We didn't have any TikTok or any of that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. How maybe old I am. But anyway, so you wait by the mailbox and their letter come in and they'll say Florida on it, Nebraska on it, Florida State on it. So you start getting these letters of interest.
Right.
And then, what happened to me was an interesting story is that we were playing a Galley at Galley High School, and they actually called it the Frog Bowl that year because their head coach, if I don't know if you remember that, Larry Kennedy, he would bite the heads off of frogs in the locker room to get his players fired up. And they accused our head coach. The media got it wrong. National media got it wrong and thought it was our head coach that did it. And so that became a big stinker because they had the wrong coach, and our coach didn't believe that was the way you get players fired up, biting heads, off a frog. So it became a big controversial story. But there was a guy by the name of Jeff Rousey who was at the University of Alabama and was a linebacker coach, and he was there looking at somebody at a Galley, and he I had a good game, and he went to the locker room after the game and asked my coach if to send him some more film on me, and told him that he was really impressed with me. And the next week he flew back down and said, "Hey, we're very interested in you. We'd like you to come to Alabama." And so which as a kid, that was really my first interaction with a coach as far as making an offer.
Right.
I did have an interaction with a coach at Georgia, but I had that my junior year. But he told me I never could play college ball, and I would have probably just can get my education. And he was there recruiting a guy by the name of Ron Rayner. And I can remember the guy because his name was Chip Wisdom, and ended up being friends with him later. But Chip Wisdom basically tapped me on the head and said, "Son, you're way too small. You'll never play at the University of Georgia." And so anyway, going back to the Alabama. So my first visit was at University of Alabama. And they sent a plane down. I got on a plane, went out there, and all of a sudden I'm in the locker room and I'm sitting with Bear Bryant, and Bear Bryant said, "Hey, we think you can play at this level. We'd like to offer you a scholarship." And to be honest with you, I give Bear Bryant credit for opening the doors for Robin Fisher because it's kind of like if, you and I went outside and we was just staring up in the air, everybody would probably go, "What are they looking at?" Right?
Right.
When Bear said we're offering Robin Fisher a scholarship at the University of Alabama, the doors just opened up for me, and then everybody said, "Who in the world is Bear Bryant looking at?" In Satellite Beach, right? And so, all of a sudden, University of Florida got a little more interest. All of a sudden, Florida State got interest. All of a sudden, Georgia got interest, and all of a sudden, Auburn and Alabama and Purdue, and so, and then back there, I don't know what it is today, but you could take 6 official visits, right? And so, I took my 6 visits, and Florida State, Georgia, Alabama, Purdue, Pittsburgh, and who am I forgetting? Florida State.
Florida State.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
That had, because I'm thinking in my head as you're telling that, if Bear was still there, I'm just going to say, as a young kid from Satellite sitting in the room with Bear Bryant, that I get goosebumps just thinking about it. That had to be a special time.
It was pretty good. There's a couple things I remember about Bear. One is he said, here at the University of Alabama, we figured out a long time ago, it only take a nickel more to go first class. And we try to do everything here first class, And so 40 something years later, I tell people all the time, I say, it only costs a nickel more to go first class.
But you and me know a nickel was a big thing back then too. I think that nickel got me a couple bus rides back home from Gainesville because I didn't have a car at the time.
Hey, Bill, right quick, you talk about I'm a little embarrassed, but it was a funny story. You talk about technology, right? So back in those days in 1978, they did these, you remember, you didn't have cell phones and stuff. So they did these person-to-person calls. If you're going to call somebody, you call a collect, you know what I mean? They go, "Hey, this is person. So I get a call, and I thought it was a collect phone call. And it says, this is Paul Bryant. I'd like to talk to Robin Fisher." And I picked the phone up. I said, I don't know a Paul Bryant. And so I just said, sorry, you got the wrong number. I hung up. So they called back again, and they said, this operator, this is Paul Bryant, and calling you. Is there a Robin Fisher there? And I said, I told y'all I don't know no Paul Bryant. so I hung up again. And then the third time they called back and said, this is Coach Brevard Bryant at University of Alabama. I said, oh, I know Coach Bryant, but I didn't know who Paul Bryant was. Yeah.
Man.
So I said, let me get that dummy. He's
yeah, right. Yeah.
Corner, right?
Yeah. This was a friend of his. I'm sorry. Let me. And he still spent that nickel on you too.
Yeah, he still said. Yeah, he did. Right. So
how'd you come to Florida? Was it the proximity? I think it was. Doug Cook, Doug Dickey was still there.
Doug Dickey was the head coach.
Right.
So there was a couple factors, and it was amazing because whoever I talked to last that week is where I was going to school. I mean, I was confused, 18-year-old, being recruited by a lot of great programs, and all of them were saying, hey, we think you can, make a difference. And so if I talk to Florida one week, I'm going to Florida. Next week, Georgia came in, I'm going to Georgia. Next week, the Bear come in, he made the first offer, I'm going to Alabama. So was very confused. And finally, as it got down to the final minutes, they had to make a decision. Right. My defensive coordinator, who was very close with, he was a Ohio State grad, and he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Coach, I don't know. I'm here to ask you, what do you think I should do?" He said, "It's your decision." He says, I said, "Yeah, but I'm just confused." And he said, "Well, you want some help?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take some help." And he said, "All right, I'm going to tell you one thing. I think you should go to school in the state that you want to live in when it's all over and you stop, and you're not playing anymore." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, if you want to live in Georgia when the ball games, when you aren't playing anymore, then probably go to school in Georgia. If you want to live in Alabama when it's all over, live in Alabama. If you want to live in Florida, then you might want to pick a Florida school." Mm-hmm. So him telling me that, and then the fact that I had a sister, I don't know if you know this, but
yeah,
you probably remember Shelby Struthers, but he claims that she was the best athlete in the family. But I had a sister that was at Florida playing basketball at the time. So, so the combination of her being there, which, she was a great athlete in herself, and the fact that my defensive line coach and defensive coordinator said, "What do you want to live when it's all over?" Because that's going to remember you. Here you are, you're doing an interview on me, right? 40 years after I gone. Right. He said, Gators will remember, or whoever, once you're gone. So that was kind of the decision thing that got me over the hump. And I said, okay, I'm going to be a Gator. And went to Florida.
Hey, I did read about your sister. I want to say Cheryl. Is that correct?
Yeah, Cheryl. Yeah.
And scored 1,000 points or more on the Gator basketball team. So, yeah. I read that.
The funny thing about that is she was a state champ in the shot put in discus, and she went to Florida on a basketball scholarship. So she was a heck of an athlete. Yeah.
Wow. So that's pretty cool. So I said earlier when I think when I introduced you, I was up there at the same time. Now I've got one of those 9-year bachelor degrees. So I got my education at Florida. I got my diploma at UCF. Okay. So as I'm reading your bio and stuff, I'm like, man, I was at those games. I remember all of that. So remind us, freshmen did not play back then. Is that correct?
Not a lot, but I luckily after the third game of my freshman year, got the starting job as a defensive lineman. So so I was nose guard after the third game. Played in the first couple, but the third game I ended up getting a nod. So I pretty much started from my third game on through Florida. So,
yeah, because I remember before, I don't think because I'm going back to the Bill Walton days and freshmen weren't allowed to play varsity sports. So I couldn't remember during that time that you were there. I also want to just remind people there was an article, I think in the Orlando Sentinel a few years ago, and you were actually listed as one of the all-time greats here in Brevard County, along with a good friend of mine, John Diamandis, who I think y'all played at the same time. Yeah. He went to school a little farther north than you did.
He went to FSU, but we were co-defensive player of the year our senior year.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, he's and like you, came back came back to Brevard County. So I thought that was pretty cool. First year was a little rough. I remember that year. I thought we tied Georgia Tech the first game, but then I read I was wrong. We tied the second game.
Right.
Of course, we lost, 10 games that year. And I thought I remembered the linebacker, Brantley, is the Georgia Tech. Isn't that the game he got hurt in? And they thought he'd never play again because of his neck. And he went on to play at Tampa a little bit. And I remember that game because it was stopped for a long, long time. I thought it was really cool that, of course, then we got Charlie Pell. And he said a lot of nice things about you as far as looking at you as the ultimate scholar athlete, as an educator and as a past coach and 2 kids that played sports. I don't think you can have any better accolade than scholar athlete when a coach is talking about you. We didn't have the portal back then. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Yeah. So it sounds like, reading a little bit, what was that like to then recover? Because you were the first, if not the only football team to go winless one year and get a bowl bid the next year. What was that off season like? I mean, what was Pell? What was it that you all believed in? Because I think the next year you went 8-4 and beat Maryland in the then Tangerine Bowl. Right. I don't guess he bit the head off of any frogs, but he must have done something to pump you guys up.
Right. So freshman year, 4-7, Dickey gets fired. Second year, sophomore year, Charlie gets hired. Came from Clemson, great expectations. But he also, there was a reason why they gotten rid of Doug Dickey, right? And that year, because it wasn't working out. But also the talent wasn't there, as far as recruiting and stuff. And Florida had fallen behind in their programs on a lot of facilities and different stuff back then too. I don't know if you remember Jan Hall. We lived in the dorm in the stadium back then, and so. He came in and unfortunately needed to clean some house. I can remember him saying, you can cut the grass, but if you don't pull and you got a bunch of weeds, you until you pull out the root, you just don't get rid of the problem. So he made some tough decisions that first year. Scott Brantley, I can remember that play, like yesterday. I was standing up the center and he came flying, and Scott always flew. When he made tackles, he left his feet and he would hit people. And I can remember him hitting running back in the hole there, and then him falling, and that was a scary moment. That was a very, very difficult year. And something Charlie Pell was big on was after wins handing out cigars. And so all year long we waited on a cigar and we never got one. And so we ended up going 10-1 that year. And then the off season was brutal. He wasn't used to not winning. Charlie Pell had played at Alabama under the Bear. He was kind of like me, lineman, overachiever there. And so off season workout, commitment to the weight room, kids, coming back and early and getting together and staying up there for summer, and working out, that all of those things really made us tougher. Right. And then he recruited a few people, and then he brought in this old coach by the name of Mike Shanahan to be his offensive coordinator. And all of a sudden, we were slinging that ball around, throwing that ball around, and got some offense. We had fairly good defense. Florida's been historically had good defenses.
Right.
So and so we go out the next year, and I don't know if you remember this, but I sure do, and a lot of my friends remind me, and it's always seemed like it comes up on TV. But that was a year, we 10-1. We go to Jacksonville. And we're playing for the SEC championship against Georgia, and we 4 minutes and 11 seconds left to go. And I'm sorry, that's not true. It's 90. It was 93 seconds. I think it was 63 seconds. 4 minutes and 3 seconds. What I meant. Anyway, run, Lindsey, run. You remember that? So that's if we stopped there, that would have been probably the greatest turnaround in history, because you've gone from 10-1 to SEC championship, which at that time Florida had never won SEC championship. So that was a horrible last minute of play, and when you got them 4th and 11, and they score,
I got to interrupt you real quick. So by that time, I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do in school. So I ended up taking a year off working for Scotty's, a home builder supply company, and had to work at Saturday. So I couldn't go to the games anymore, but we would pipe the game over the intercom system. Okay. So we're working and listening. And then all of a sudden, Lindsey Scott, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And I actually, I think that next spring, I was at Burger King out by the Oaks Mall, and I ran into him and Herschel Walker. Okay. And, they're my age, but I'm like, and I want just the nicest guys you ever want to meet. Oh, yeah. But no, I remember that. I listened to it, like I said, on the intercom. Yeah. And, and I think that I think that brings up a great point. We didn't have the portal back then. We didn't have the transfer. If you did, you probably had to sit out a year. So you guys hung together, and Charlie brought in some other, and you made one of the best turnarounds in the history of NCAA. So it can be done without kids jumping ship, and you all proved that.
That portal is a totally different game, right? I mean, it's just
it's kind of tough. So then you went 8-4. You beat Maryland in the Tangerine Bowl. Next year, I see 7-5. To my FSU fans, you defeated FSU after a 4-game losing streak, 35-3. So and Bobby Bowden, I think I read where he thought maybe his guys were giving you the plays because he said you spent more time in the backfield than his running back did. So and as them, being one of the schools that was trying to recruit you, he certainly knew you real well. I was at that Peach Bowl. I went up there to visit a friend. Yeah. And there's two things I remember other than unfortunately West Virginia beating us. It was cold and it was rainy. And to sit there in the stands was just because that was the old stadium back then. Right. It was a horrible day. My God, it was tough.
A funny story, that game was we got to Atlanta. We practiced in Gainesville to the last few days, and Charlie worked us really hard, and we thought we were well prepared. And we got to Atlanta, and the curfew. Charlie set the curfew at 10 o'clock. And players were really mad, like, God, we've been out here working. I can't believe he's making us. So, they came to me and said, you got to talk to Coach Bell. And so I went up to talk to Coach Bell, and I said, Coach, players are a little upset that you're making an early curfew. He says, well, I think that's appropriate time. I said, well, you're probably right, Coach. I'm just telling you, you always tell me, give you a feel what's going on. And he says, well, what do you think? I said, well, I don't know. Maybe one night or so, make it to midnight. And he said, okay, that's what you want. You can have it. He said, I ain't worried about you. I'm worried about them young ones. And he said, but if you want it, you can have it. And so I said, well, Coach, I only want it if you think it makes sense. And he goes, no, I don't think it makes sense, but y'all got it. and he almost kind of said, if it don't work out, I'm going to come back to you, I'm going, well, let's just keep it at 10. He goes, no, you already asked for it. So he extended curfew to midnight, and needless to say, 2 days later we're playing, and we didn't play very well. And he looked at me, and I said, I was just one of those games, right? I was just the messenger.
Being one of the captains, like you said, you were doing what he wanted you to do as far as that goes. And I know you're humble just reading about you, and I've watched you in the past. As far as a county commissioner, et cetera. But I just want the audience to know you were voted one of the top 100 players to ever play at Florida, an article that Pat Dooley did. 348 tackles, more than any other down lineman. I'm not sure if that's been broken yet, but we're just going to, from what I last read, top 10 at that time, tackles for loss with 41, tied for 7th with sacks at 21. So for somebody that didn't play football, I'm between two football players, my dad and my son. They talk about linebackers have more tackles usually than. So explain to me, if that's the case, what is a lineman's, like your position? What is your job? Is it to plug the holes, so that the guy behind you can make the tackles? Why do linemen not usually have more tackles than linebackers?
Linebackers, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that record, which is hard to believe, it still stands today. That I'm the only guy that ever led the team in tackles.
Yeah.
But they had a kind of unique scheme for me because of my quickness, and so 9 out of 10 times, it's my job was to create a double team. For me to create a double team, and the scheme was for that linebacker to be able to run and fill the hole if I'm tying up 2 people. So, make contact with the center, hope that they want a guard coming down on me to, rush off. If they didn't double team me, then the play was, Robin, we're going to do what they call an Ole technique, which is basically you sidestep the center, you look like your head up, and then all of a sudden you throw him and you sidestep him and then run down flat down the line. So if the teams that didn't double team me, then the scheme will be, okay, we're going to Ole him, which allowed me to create havoc in the backfield. And that Florida State game, Bobby and them decided that they thought their center was quick enough and strong enough to handle me. And so they came right off the bat, single blocking me, and then which was allowing their guards to get on our linebackers and get in their face.
Right.
And so the defensive scheme went from, okay, if they're not going to double you, then we're going to just cut you loose. And so they let me do my Olay technique, and I was hopping around the center, and so we had a good day. But that's typically the scheme was, if they aren't double teaming you, then you're not doing your job. But so we created double teams. I was getting doubled a lot.
Yeah, I think what I saw was very impressive. That one year that you led with 110 tackles, 73 were solo. I mean, that's just unheard of. I mean, 70%. So, and then like you said, as far as hitting the hole, all those tackles for a loss. There was a 2022 article. You were number 1 as one of the 12 most underrated players. And so again, I know how humble you are, but I want to make sure that our audience knows, especially us Florida Gators, that and to see that record still stands. And like you said, with the scheme that they run nowadays, that might not ever be broken, because that's not a focus anymore sometimes, as far as the defensive linemen, the nose guards making those tackles. You got drafted, I believe, number 271 by the Dolphins. You played a couple of years, was it Chicago and I think Arizona in the USFL?
Yes, sir.
And so now we're back to what your high school coach told you. And I always find this interesting, because there's so many people, including myself, not as a sports great. You decide to come back to Brevard. So you come back home, so to speak, open up your insurance agency, which I think, if I calculated, 30 some years, how long? 35 years? Is that about right?
Yeah, 35 years to State Farm agent here in Titusville. I did about 6 years in the commercial real estate market in the Palm Bay area, and moved up here in '89. So I've been up here. May 1 was 35 years. So
wow, congratulations to you. That's awesome. When did that seed start to get planted, as far as moving back to Brevard and getting into that business?
So USFL started having some financial issues, if you remember.
Right.
And that started off as the Arizona Wranglers, and then it's the craziest thing that 2 owners, one owner was from Arizona, one owner was from Chicago, they decided to flop teams. So the next year, our same team became the Chicago Blitz. A lot of crazy stuff happened in the USL that back then. So we was in Chicago. We were there in actually in Chicago, which in Easter it was snowing. For this old Florida boy, it was a little bit different playing in the USFL. Dealing with snow, right? And anyway, I hurt my knee, and so the rest of the season I didn't. Season was about over. I didn't play, but I can. You probably remember this name, Dick Blake, old time Cocoa, high school, and
yes.
I was home, and I ran into Dick Blake, and he said to me, sometimes you got to stop chasing that rainbow, and it's time to get on with your life and career. And I went, what are you trying to tell me? And he says, maybe it's time to just get on with life. And so I tell him all the time when I see him now, he ruined my career because I thought I had another year or two in me, and, but it made some sense that it was just I've had a run and it was a good one,
sure.
but it was time
It
to
was.
get on with
Yeah.
the business and life.
You mentioned Dick. I was at Cocoa High School when he was there. My dad's retired from Cocoa High School. Then 20 years after being in retail, I followed in my dad's footsteps and got an education. But I'm going to be posting tomorrow night. I did an interview with Coach Leroy Smith, who was a coach there, lives in Titusville, 90-some years old. I could have spent all day with him, but those stories with him and a friend of mine, Harry Johnson, wanted me to say hi. I think you were neighbors down in Palm Bay. We golfed together, so that's pretty good. And you've done a lot of great things in Brevard County. And again, hats off to having your own business and for that long. I read that you were interested a little bit in politics. County commissioner for I think 2 terms, 8 years. I guess they have term limits.
Right.
Did some great things there. When you got that political bug, how did you choose a county commissioner as the one that you wanted to proceed to get into?
Yeah. I actually got that bug at 20, I think either 27 or 28, Bill. Okay. Because a lot of people didn't know this, but I was actually a Palm Bay City Council. So I ran my first county race or city race was in Palm Bay. And I was selling commercial real estate at the time, and a couple zoning matters and city council matters, it went against me, and I had the listing on that property, and I finally said, these guys don't know what they're doing. And I said, somebody said, well, if you don't like it, you ought to run for office. So I said, okay. So I ran for office and woke up, and next morning I was elected. So when the first time at 27, I think 28 years old in Palm Bay, served there, and then that's when State Farm came along and said, hey, we got opportunity to open an office in Titusville. Are you interested? And so I ended up resigning my term there a little early, moved because I had to move the Titusville requirement by State Farm. So I moved up to Titusville, kind of stayed out of the political world for 10 years, didn't do anything. And then lo and behold, a councilwoman up in Titusville up here, she resigned, and the city was going to make an appointment. And so a bunch of community leaders came to me and said, hey, we know you got a little bit of experience in politics. We think you'd be a great match, and will you consider applying? So I applied, and they appointed me. And so I did 2.5 years as on that appointment. And then I said, okay, I'm good now. I'm gonna go sit down for a while. So I sat down for another. So it's like 10 years between Palm Bay and 10 years in Titusville. And then after that, I sat down for 10 years after the Titusville deal. And then Truman Scarborough, who was a longtime commissioner up here, he was termed out. And so, door knocking and people saying, hey, you ought to run for office. And so we ran, and, luckily we won. And we woke up and we're, first African-American ever been on a county commission seat, first Democrat, I think there was one other, but mainly as a Republican county. So it was kind of interesting. And a lot of people didn't know what I was, because I always said I'm just Robin, but they label you once you run for these, county commission and higher races. But anyway, we won our first term by 300 something votes, and then we won our next term, a lot more convincing. But yeah, so you can do 2 terms, and we did our 2 terms, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's a tough business though, and it's more now than it's ever been. But and we still somewhat have our hands in it because we do some consulting on the side for people that's trying to advocate for growth and project progress, right? And so we get those calls often asking people, can you help us get through the process, because it's difficult to develop these days.
Yeah, it's one of the things too that I saw, and hats off to you for that, was the Field of Dreams. That I think is just phenomenal as far as you all did. I got a little bit of a chuckle when I was reading. I think there was 3 of you all that the last meeting, I guess because of term limits, left the county commissioner seats. And one of the guys, you were talking about how you didn't get along right there at the beginning, but that you that you appreciated that whatever you all did, it made you bring your A game. And and I thought that was pretty cool that, I'm on a few local HOA boards, and, and that's good that you don't have 5 people that all agree. Otherwise, nothing would ever get done. But I thought that was just kind of funny how you mentioned that, and you thanked them. And so that was good stuff. But it's good to have that type of relationship, because you need to hear all different points and different things that come up.
If I could say something on that, if you got a minute, I think it's
sure.
important. So Andy Anderson was the one I think you were probably making reference to, and Andy Anderson and I came, on different sides of the political spectrum when we first came in office, and him and another member had an agenda, and I guess I had an agenda too, but we didn't get along that well. And it's football, believe it or not, and it's really, I'm telling you a story that brought us together. He was a huge Cleveland Brown fan.
Okay.
And so in the political world there, he'll have an issue that I wasn't supportive of, and I would go against it and fight against it. I'll have one, and he was always pushing and fighting against mine. And what we both realize is, and I said this to Andy, I said, Andy, it's like football, man. When it's 4th and 1 and the coach calls the play, everybody on the team's got to run the play. And I said, you can't have somebody thinking it's a pass when it's, it's up the middle, run. I said, and so if everybody don't do their job, the play doesn't work. I said, we got to start treating these political decisions on the benches as wherever the vote comes out. If you win, it's a 3-2 and it's your favor. If it's I win, it's a 3-2. It's no matter where that is, we got to run the play, even if you didn't vote for it, right? Even if you don't like the play, players don't get up to the huddle and go, I don't like the play coach call, so I'm going to run it, right? So, him and I had an agreement that no matter where we were on the politicals, whether we lost or won, once the play's been called, we both got to make sure we're successful and do everything we can. And we ended up, as you heard the story, and unfortunately Andy's passed now. But to that story, I actually, which is it's a little touching to me, because we didn't get along. We served 8 years together, and I'm the first person his wife called and said, will you speak at Andy's funeral? And so so you can get along in this political world, and you can compromise and and do that, and we need more of that today.
Yeah, we do. The last, as you know, we're kind of in an environment now where that's taking place, and I'm like you. I just said, listen, whatever happens in whatever race, I just pray that individual benefits all of us, and life goes on. And that's how we have to be, is support whatever an outcome of whatever race is. So that's a good story. And, and that's the right way to look at it. Once it's done, I tell people, don't worry about things you can't change. This is a decision, we have to support it. A couple things before I wrap up, and I appreciate your time today. I just want to, so I think if I read this right, you were in Columbia, South Carolina, working for Quaker Oats. And I guess one of your assistant coaches called you about the USFL. And I think if I read it right, he wanted to know if you wanted to sell grits or play football. I thought that was, and I think, what did you call your boss and say, hey, I'm not coming in tomorrow?
I just got a job at Quaker Oats. I don't think I've been there 45 days, I don't think. And you know who that called? It was 2 guys. One of them really famous. It was Mike Bugard, who was my defensive line coach at Florida. And the other guy was Mickey Andrews.
Right.
So Andrew was at Florida at the same time. So they had gotten a job at Arizona. They were the defensive coordinator and defensive line coach. And so they called and they said, hey, we need you. And I'm going, because I just took this job at Quaker Oaks. So I got this. They gave me a Pontiac Le Mans. I got a $17,000 a year salary. I got a briefcase with a bunch of foods in it. And I'm calling on these Piggly Wigglies and Food Lines and all these grocery stores, in that area. I had my area from Columbia to Augusta, but anyway, I'm calling these grocery stores and I'm making sure that their pancake mix, Aunt your mama, their dog food, and everything. Everybody's got their proper shelf space, and it's Arizona, 3 hours, whatever. Well, it's 2 hours different. I get this call and go, you want to play football? Or you want to sell grits? What are you gonna do? You gonna keep putting up those grit stands? I'm 23,
Yeah,
20,
right.
and you still feel like you got it in your blood, right? And
It's funny. My first job as an assistant manager was here in Rockledge with Scotty's, and my base salary. We got a little bit of a supplement bonus, but my base was $14,500, and this was 81, and I'm like, I'm making $1,000 a month.
Right.
I've made the big time.
Exactly.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. I read this, so it's public knowledge. So I'm not mentioning. You had a Friday ritual that I read about that I think you said started as a junior in high school, and you carried it on. What was that Friday ritual that you had before your games?
So I was a bubble bath guy,
Okay.
And so pretty Friday nights. We would go, like, especially at Florida, we go eat, we have dinner. We always went to a movie.
Right.
Coach went back to the conference area. Coach gave his pregame speech, things he wants you to think about.
Right.
I go in my room. I'd pull out Mr. Bubble. I fill up the bathtub, and I'll sit there in the bathtub between 30 and 45 minutes, and I would be replaying every block scenario I thought I was going to get that day and how I was going to handle it. So it was kind of my little, like, okay, if the center comes here, you're going to do this and do that. If the center comes here, you do this and do that. If the center does this, you do that, And so I kind of ran through the game plan, and I just did it with, a Diet Coke and Mr. Bubbles.
And so that was like your Zen moment. And I think I read one of my favorite, I think peanut butter and jelly was one of your little meals that you had. I thought that was pretty cool. I read that and I'm like, man, I gotta bring that up. So before I leave Gainesville, I think of a couple places. College students, we didn't have a lot of money. We got those coupon books. Where are we going to go eat? Skeeters was one of my favorite places because they had the biscuits.
Biscuits, right?
So I've asked people this before, and I've got a few that remember. Did you ever eat at Mama Lowe's?
No.
Do you remember that a place? It was a little house in the Black community, and as soon as word got out that it was inexpensive and good, and I mean we ate there. So I mean, pork chops and meatloaf, but it was just I haven't met too many people that remember. It's just a little house. They cooked it in the back. But that was good times.
We were on that meal plan at Florida, right? And we didn't have this portal and this NIL money back then, right? So we would get 3.5, 4 meals easy, as part of being on the scholarship program. So most of the time we were eating in the dorm.
Well, that was good. We talked a little bit about portal and NIL and good for the game, not good. Still needs some tweaking. What do you think about the portal and the NIL?
I'm not a fan of it. I mean, I think there is a need to give players some funds to be able to live right without feeling like they've got to do something different.
Right.
I mean, there's families from different economic situations and
and
there's a lot of money in football, so I get that. I think it ought to be across the board. If you're a lineman, you get this. If you're a running back, you get this. Your quarterback, you get that. Put some type of controls on it. And then for me, that what's probably more disappointing is that nobody's talking about education anymore. Nobody's talking about commitments. I mean, you can switch teams every time you get mad or you're not given enough play time, and so that kind of stuff I think takes away from the game. And I hope they can get that figured out. Or if you transfer, you only can transfer us one time. You got kids transferring 3 and 4 times. And so,
Yeah, we've got a young man I was reading about the other day. Great quarterback. I think he's going to have a great played at UCF. Then he went to Oklahoma, and now he's at Oregon. I remembered, like I said, I got a 9-year degree. When I transferred from Florida and went to UCF, you had to have a minimum of like 30 hours for them to be, because again, they didn't want me coming in like, hey, I just need 3 classes. Oh, okay. And we'll give you So I don't. They must have waived that now, I guess.
Nobody cares if they get their degree, right? They don't care about work.
Yeah.
I mean, you like to think they do, but a lot of them kids are just. It's all about what's in it for me. How much money can I make in sport, and not realizing that the University of Florida, for me personally, it helps set me up for life. I've got a good education, play for a great program with great name recognition, and I don't know if you can put a value on that. I mean, I guess if you take my last 40 years of earnings, it's probably been pretty good. So that's a pretty good value, right? But nobody talks about that anymore. And so
I agree. You're right. And I'm like you. I thought when it first came out, because I'm going back to Hall, the quarterback or the coach, and he gave one of the young men money for a bus ticket to go to his grandmother's funeral, and he got hammered for that. So I get that, and I'm like you. I thought you give everybody a couple $1,000s so that they could afford those type of things. I didn't know we were going to be making millionaires out of the select few. So
now before now they say you can do it in high school, right?
Well, I'm following the FHS. That's I don't know. That's going to be interesting wherever that goes. The SEC 16 teams, Oklahoma, all these. You like that? I mean, we're starting to lose that regional feel. I still can't. When I watch Maryland play in Nebraska, I have to remember that's a Big Ten game. I just can't. Now I got Stanford and Wake Forest. How do you like that? How do you like these mega conferences? Does it take away, or do you think it's more exciting as a player to now play some of these other teams?
Well, as an SEC guy, I'm excited to see them get in the conference because I want them to see what it's like to have to line up every week and play your game, right? I mean, they've been. It is. SEC is a tough place to play, and as I say, the Vanderbilts can beat you if you're uncareful, right? I mean,
I know,
right? We know that, right? And so, I think that's going to probably be the biggest difference for Texas and Oklahoma, for example, is that there's no off weeks, and our Gators this year. I mean, we have no off week at all. I mean, it's a brutal schedule.
But even like last year, as tough as the Gators were, look how many close games they had. So again, the Missouri and Arkansas and Georgia. So, as rough as we had it, we weren't an easy out.
No.
And we lived in Atlanta for a little while. I was up in Georgia. My dad flew up, drove up to Nashville. We were going to watch the Vanderbilt game. I think it was 88. And darn it, they didn't beat us. And then I think that was the last time they beat us until they beat us again a few years ago. So one last question. What advice, you've got young individuals in high school playing a sport. We talked about education, which I'm 100% on board with that as well. As they look for colleges, where I want to play football or lacrosse or soccer or track, what advice do you have for them as far as, and you got some great advice yourself as far as where to choose, what couple comments do you have for them as they're trying to pick where they want to go play and looking at the bigger picture?
Yeah. Well, when you look at the bigger picture, I think the advice my high school coach gave me, right? Go play in the state you think you want to live in, because long after your playing days are over with, people are going to remember you played at that university and they probably were part of the fan base, and that'll open up doors in itself, right? Unfortunately, a lot of kids think they're going to make it to that next level, and if we know not many kids make it to the NFL, it's a hard business to get into. But so education is important. If you're going to get a chance to play in college, maybe play it for a team. And I say Gators is the one, but if it ain't Gators, Florida State or Miami or whatever, it's just play, or UCF for that matter.
Right.
And then I think the other message would be is there's a lot of things that can distract you from what's important. Right. And you got to really stay focused on what the mission is and what you're there to do and what you're trying to accomplish, and nothing takes the place of hard work. So if you really want to work hard, right? And I say the harder I work, the luckier I get. It's just kind of what I like, right?
I agree with you, Robin, on that. Like I said, luckily I was smart enough to finish my degree, going to night school as I was working, and then fast forward 15 years and got into education, and then that diploma came in handy. So, like I tell young adults too, especially at least get your high school diploma. You got to get something, because one day, like you said, that opportunity might come up. It might not be tomorrow. And like for me, it was 20 years later to get into education. I'm like, wow, I'm glad that I finished that. So you're right. You got to look beyond a little bit and be ready for that. Well, listen, my friend, I sincerely appreciate your time today. It was it was great talking with you. I know how busy you are. And again, as I was mentioning, doing this research, I'm living back my days, because I was in Gainesville at the same time and went to some of those games. And as my daughter being a proud satellite graduate, it's just amazing all the things you accomplished to come back here to Brevard, be a successful businessman as well as a county commissioner, speaks volumes. And I just can't thank you enough. I appreciate your time, and I just look forward to continued great things from you.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on today, and thank you. And go Gators.
Go Gators. All right, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. So that was Robin Fisher. Again, just a great role model for our young people today. And again, I just wanted to remind people here in Brevard County, we've had some great athletes for a long, long time. And he is certainly one of them, one of the top football players to ever come out of Brevard County. Still rated as one of the top 100 to play at Florida, one of the top 12 underrated, still holds the record for most tackles by a lineman at 348. As humble as anybody can be, because he's also been very successful after his playing days here as an insurance agent and county commissioner. And from the bottom of my heart, Press Box Overtime certainly thanks Robin Fisher for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it, and just some great information as far as history and things that have come from that point. So I'm Bill Maharis, Press Box Overtime. Enjoy the rest of your day, and remember, life, it's more than just a game.